Welcome. You're listening to This Leader, the podcast. If you lead people and are seeking the transformational, high-impact secrets that will lead to greater joy and fulfillment in your work, will optimize your team performance, and will help you create a happy, highly productive workplace, then you are this leader and you're in the right place. I'm your host, Claire Laughlin, and each week my guests and I will explore the mindsets, techniques, and actionable strategies that will help you build the career, team, and organization of your dreams. Because I believe no one should have to suffer in a dysfunctional workplace. Let's get started. When I was in college, I took a series of full contact self-defense courses. You've probably seen these online where the participants fight men in big padded suits. It was quite an experience. And I learned a lot, the least of which, honestly, were the physical skills. I have to say that in the end, my greatest lessons were about being more aware in the world and speaking up for myself, making better choices. But the greatest gift out of all of that experience was that it led me to Irene van der Zande and Kidpower. So I moved back to Santa Cruz after college, and I wanted to continue my self-defense journey. And Irene had branched off from doing that same genre of self-defense type of work, but she had started a different organization called Kidpower, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to teaching safety skills to kids and their adults. And her approach was fun, not scary. And it was really, really effective. And after meeting Irene, I just had to be a part of it. So I volunteered to do anything I could to support the mission. And who knew that I would be the one to benefit the most? That was over 30 years ago. And now Kidpower International has taught millions of people of all ages how to be safe with others. As the global nonprofit leader in emotional and personal safety education, Kidpower specializes in skills to promote healthy relationships and to protect children, teens, and adults from bullying and cyberbullying, sexual abuse, abduction, assault, harassment, domestic and dating violence, and human trafficking. It is an amazing organization. Kidpower serves families, schools, organizations, workplaces, and communities worldwide and tailors its programs to include those who are in most need because of disabilities, prejudice, mental health problems, poverty, and other life challenges. I've had the good fortune of working with Kidpower in so many capacities, from being in their office early on, making copies and running around from place to place, to teaching courses and even developing curriculum at one point for teenage girls. And that was really transformational. Now I'm a board member and I learn new things from Irene and my amazing Kidpower friends and community around the world. And in today's episode, I talk with Irene about workplace boundaries. That includes setting and respecting boundaries because we need to be good at both. And as a leader, these skills are imperative because they are precursors to every good coaching or performance conversation. Irene and I are going to discuss and practice everyday situations that are the starting point for healthy relationships at work. So let's dive in. Welcome, Irene. So good to see you.
It's great to be here.
Irene, I'm so delighted that we get this chance to be together today because we're going to talk about setting and respecting boundaries today. And I have learned so much from you about setting good boundaries. And I mean, far beyond just like what words to use, which we're going to talk about today, but also deeply about my comfort with boundaries. And I don't know how to say this exactly, but kind of my right to set boundaries, like my right to claim my space and be okay with it if I just don't feel right about something. So first, let me ask you, how did you get so good at this boundary setting practice, among many other things? And we will talk about some other things too, but how did you get so good at this?
There's this great quote from Mark Twain that good judgment is the result of experience, and often experience is the result of poor judgment. And the same is true about boundaries.
Yes.
I have made so many mistakes. I've seen so many people around me make mistakes, and we learn. We learn what our boundaries are and are not, and we learn how to speak up in ways that help us be true to ourselves and also kind to the other person.
Absolutely. It's so true. Actually, my listeners have heard a little bit about Kid Power in the introduction, Kidpower International. But I want you to take just a moment and, in your words, describe what Kid Power does and what makes the Kid Power approach so unique.
Well, I feel very, very fortunate that Kid Power, we started in 1989 and we have grown into an international organization that's a nonprofit leader in teaching people psychological and physical safety skills for preventing and solving problems. And these skills help to strengthen relationships and prevent harm, such as bullying and abuse and harassment and conflict.
Yeah,
And we do this by really focusing on skills, not just talking, and on practicing, turning problems into successful practices.
absolutely. Another thing I've really learned from you is just that really hands on approach and truly to pick up your hands, literally pick up your hands and try it,
Yes.
use your body, use your mind, use your words, use your voice, use everything, and just start practicing. So, of all the things we could talk about today, there are so many. I do want to talk about very specifically setting boundaries in the workplace because I know that this is a real issue. I know for me personally, I have discovered many of my boundaries through moments of great discomfort. And I think it's so important to get to know yourself, get to know where your boundaries are. And often we find that, like you said, like Mark Twain's quote, like when they're violated in a sense, when they get crossed one way or another. And then we learn something about ourselves. And then if we can practice and figure that out, I think that's so, so important. And if you'll indulge me just for a minute, I want to tell this story about when we first started working together, which was probably 1991 or 2 or something, way back. And one of the first things I learned was about Kid Power's like guiding principle. And if I'm remembering right, it's about a child's safety and well-being are more important than anyone's inconvenience or embarrassment or discomfort or something. Tell me what it is. I want to know the real words because that's how I've interpreted it and carried it with me all these years.
Got it right. We just expanded it. And this came when Ellen Bass, our founding board president, and I were at the bank signing the papers to make Kid Power into a nonprofit. And Ellen said, "What we're doing here is revolutionary. We're saying that the safety and well being of a child are more important than anyone's embarrassment, inconvenience, or offense." And I said, "Would you repeat that?" And I wrote it on the back of an envelope with a pen I borrowed from the bank manager. And it became our founding principle, but very quickly, because we serve everybody, not just kids, it became our safety and well being are more important than uncomfortable feelings.
Yeah, right. And I think that's so important because the uncomfortable feelings, it's the discomfort of how do I enter into this moment? Is it okay that I'm not feeling right about this, even if I can't put a finger on it, even if there's no reason I can point to? I just don't feel quite right. I think that's often how we learn that a boundary has been crossed.
Yes.
And just to have those words, let me tell you a quick story about how this played out when my kids were little, because this was a saving grace when my boys were young. And I had my older son, very shy. And I remember a time when I went to go pick him up from school, and there's another mom there, and she says, "Oh, can we have your son over for a play date?" We had talked about this. Our family rule was my kids don't go to people's houses unless we know them pretty well. And good, bad, right, wrong, that's the other thing I learned about boundaries. You don't have to explain them to anybody. And yet, here's this mom who is very friendly. I've obviously seen her at pickup and drop off and all,
little chit chat, but I don't feel like I know her well enough. I don't know where she lives and all this. And so just to be able to stand up straight with confidence and say, thank you so much for that invitation. That's so kind of you. And I'd love for the boys to play. And I'd like you and I to get to know each other better first. And so, how about we take the boys to the park and go have a play date ourselves? How would that feel for you? And being able to do that with confidence. Not that I didn't feel a little awkward about it. Of course, being a little worried that I'd hurt her feelings or that she'd go home and it would be the story of like, hey, that other overprotective mom. But in the end, I felt better going to bed that night. So things like that.
Yeah, we kind of sum it up by saying we're going to put safety first.
Yeah.
And we take a big, broad definition of safety.
Right. I love that. It's so powerful. Okay. So let's focus in on boundaries, if that's all right. We talked about this, right? So we often know a boundary is cross-cut because we feel uncomfortable. And yet there's this other discomfort about setting the boundary that can arise, especially if someone pushes back. I want to talk about all those things.
Okay.
But I also want to say, and I know you'll agree with me, that good boundaries are what creates really healthy relationships, right?
Yes. They're at the heart of healthy relationships, and healthy relationships are essential for, being successful, having joy and fun in life, and actually protecting mental health and increasing productivity.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And ultimately, as leaders, that's what we want. We want to be in pursuit of healthy relationships, good boundaries. Of course, boundaries can change over time, but all so important. So, why do you think boundary setting can be uncomfortable? What makes it hard for some people?
Well, we often ask people, and it's also uncomfortable to receive boundaries and respecting boundaries. So it goes both ways. And we often ask people, do you dislike being told what to do or that someone doesn't like something you are doing? And most of them, just like you are right now, nod their heads.
Yes.
And that's normal. And knowing that setting a boundary might cause the other person to be upset or disappointed or angry causes a lot of people to avoid speaking up directly, often speaking up to lots of other people. And so the key in respecting boundaries is to do your best to notice the impact of your behavior on somebody else. And to notice if you're somebody that's very effusive and affectionate, and this is somebody that's more introverted, to recognize it and give them more space.
Yes.
If somebody does speak up, to recognize that feeling of, ooh, I did not like hearing that.
Right.
And yet to tell yourself so much better that the person tells me than that they tell everybody else. And anyway, for our relationship, it's better that I know.
Mm-hmm.
And hit the pause button for those angry feelings or upset or uncomfortable or sad or whatever they are. Calm down and say, thank you for telling me.
Oh my goodness. Wouldn't it be amazing if people could really receive feedback more like that, myself included? Like we all know those things, right? Where, you do your best to be kind and to set a boundary and to say things in a non-offensive manner. And the other person comes back with any number of things from, hurt feelings. Oh, how could you say such a thing? You've hurt my feelings. I didn't know it was so hard on you. Or, like there's a billion ways they could respond. But our ability to be receptive and to learn and grow in the moment, absolutely critical. And I think that's something that often in boundary setting conversations, we talk about boundary setting and how important it is to set the boundary, maybe not so much about how it is to really respect that boundary of others.
Yes. And to know that often boundaries have to be negotiated. What time are we going to meet?
Right.
What is late?
Yeah.
And what is honesty? And what is rude?
Right. Let me take us back just for a moment to this idea of when somebody else sets a boundary and it gets uncomfortable for us. Again, I can remember lots of times when, and it's sort of the similar theme is this. when I'm overdoing it, when I'm saying yes to too much, when I'm taking on more than I should, when I'm not setting a healthy boundary, and then someone else does, my brain will start, oh, well, you know, oh, you can't work over the weekend, but I can. Maybe neither of us should be working over the weekend.
Let's renegotiate the deadline. Let's postpone this.
Right. Yep. Let's negotiate. But I think there's a lot of goodness in really noticing those moments when you're upset with someone else's boundary and then doing that double take. What's going on for me? It's a self awareness moment because it really is not about their boundary, right? I guess it could be a little bit of hurt feelings or whatever about how they say what they say, but ultimately there's something else going on there and it's worth digging a little and trying to discover it, right?
Yes. So you're standing shoulder to shoulder instead of the thing about pointing fingers at each other. And we pointing fingers at the problem. It might be a breakdown in communication. It might be a difference in style, a difference in priorities or needs.
Okay, so how about we get to some practice? How does that feel?
Sounds great.
Great. You're the best at practice. I think I'd like to go through a couple of different workplace scenarios, and I'll ask you to walk us through what a good boundary would sound like with each of these things. And we'll do a couple different ones, like colleagues, or between manager and the employee or something like that. And maybe let's start with a supervisor setting a boundary with an employee. And I've prepared just a couple of scenarios here I'm going to throw at you and see what you think. So here's the situation. Let's imagine that the employee is violating a workplace policy, but the policy is not super clear. So the employee doesn't really understand the limits. For example, there might be a policy that says, keep your socializing to a minimum or something like that. But let's say the employee is spending too much time talking to others, and though they're very kind and they're friendly. And I think in that employee's mind, they're trying to build relationship. Okay. But now other people are not getting their work done. So how could a supervisor handle that with the employee?
I just want to say, first of all, the supervisor can also handle it with the other employees by having them practice, but we'll get to that in a minute. Let's start with this employee. So let's imagine I'm the supervisor and you're not going to necessarily give me an easy time about this, okay?
Okay.
All right. So I say, thank you for meeting with me.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. What's up?
Well, I appreciate how friendly you are. And it seems like you're spending so much time chatting with other people that they're having trouble getting their work done. And I think it's also affecting your work.
Oh my. Okay. So let me just pause here, a little timeout in our little role play. Because what I'm thinking to myself right now, Irene, and I just want to kind of say this out loud, is this could go a lot of different ways. The employee could deny it. I don't know what you're talking about. I never do that.
Yes.
The employee could turn it back around and say, who's telling you this? I don't believe you, something like that, or some version of that. The employee could just say, okay, I'll stop talking to people altogether. You opened a good conversation. You were clear about what the issue was, and you were kind about it. And I appreciate that.
Yeah. But suppose you react by saying, I never do that. Just say that.
Yeah, I never do that. I don't overtalk. I don't spend too much time doing that.
I understand that it seems that way to you. The key is to acknowledge and then restate the boundary.
Okay.
And acknowledge, I understand it seems that way to you, and I know you want to do a great job and you work hard. And always say and instead of but, because but cuts off the communication. I have noticed you getting into long conversations about your personal life. How can I support you in noticing when this is happening in a way that'll feel respectful to you?
Oh, that's good. That's good. Okay, so then we might go on to have a longer coaching conversation about what this behavior really looks like, when it shows up, and specifically how you can give me a signal or how I could monitor myself or something like that.
Yes.
Okay, that's great. But it starts with a good, clear boundary. So I'm just going to go back to what you said earlier. You said, I appreciate how friendly you are. So something good about the person.
Call that a boundary bridge, because I noticed that skilled people always started with something positive.
Right.
I was doing it myself unconsciously. So we just named it the boundary bridge because it helps people feel connected.
Absolutely.
And then that's why the and, because bridges don't say but, they say and.
Yes, I like that. So, and I think one of the reasons we want to start with something positive is this idea that this is a relationship building conversation. We need to stay anchored in that. We are not here to offend the person or to, hopefully, you're not at the point of creating ultimatums and things like that, that you're addressing this issue early on in a way that can be really helpful. Now, of course, there are other kinds of boundaries where it's sort of an immediate violation of something that really is egregious. And that's a different kind of a conversation. But I love that. Now, talk to me about the colleague to colleague thing. You said earlier we could help the supervisor help the other colleagues as well. So what would that look like?
We teach people that when somebody's going on and on and on, and you're being kind and polite and listening, it could be complaining, it could be telling a personal story. This could happen at family gatherings or other places as well as work. But if you wait for a pause in a monologue, it's going to cost a lot of time. So being prepared to interrupt firmly and respectfully. So suppose I'm a colleague who keeps on going on, and I want you to practice interrupting by saying, "Excuse me," and my name, Irene. And you might have to do it a couple of times, because when people are in the flow of a story, they don't hear very well.
Okay.
Okay? So, Claire, I just got to tell you, blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And then this
Excuse me,
happened,
Irene. Excuse me.
blah, 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 blah. Better say it a little.
Irene, excuse me.
What?
Excuse me. Sorry to interrupt you, but we need to get back to work.
Oh, right. Well, just let me finish my thought.
Not now, Irene. I'm sorry. I think you're a great person, and it'll work better for me if we can have conversations like this outside of work.
Oh, all right.
Even just in this sort of practice little role play, it's uncomfortable sometimes to jump in, interrupt a person. I think you just have to, again, tell yourself in advance, this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to be kind, but I'm going to be very direct.
Yes.
And I'm going to jump in and interrupt. Actually, I have a friend I should practice that with.
Be prepared with a positive response. Be prepared. Remember, you don't like being told what to do. This other person very likely won't. And that really helps to not be upset or disappointed when somebody reacts negatively.
Absolutely. So important. Okay, how about we do a harder one? This is a situation I hear about now and then, and I just want to bring it up because it's a little bit more complicated, but it's much more kind of workplace. Let's say a new policy was rolled out recently across the organization, and it was suspending all travel due to some budget issues or something. So no one's supposed to travel. However, the sales team still gets to travel to client meetings and conferences. Maybe unbeknownst to the rest of the organization, the sales team is also making other adjustments. We don't know, okay? But we know that travel's been suspended, but sales still goes on sales calls. So there's an employee who believes this is really unfair and talks about how unfair this policy is continuously to colleagues, but also bringing it up in company meetings and talking, just sort of rumors, gossiping even. And even though the rationale for the exception to sales has been explained and the policy was thoughtfully crafted, the employee continues to bring it up. First, before we go into the boundary setting, what do you think might be happening for the employee?
It is really normal to get very upset about perceived unfairness. It goes back to childhood and siblings.
Yes,
How many times do we hear, how come they got to do it and I didn't?
absolutely.
And so it's just, there's a lot of us that are just hardwired.
Yeah.
You feel pretty righteous about it and unhappy about a loss of privilege or any kind of loss. And so processing your feelings by talking out loud is normal. And doing it to get support and move on is one thing. And unless people have the skills to recognize that that's what they need, then they're likely to actually complain. And there's a sort of a ping pong effect of you complain, then you complain, and I complain, and it wastes a lot of time and energy and doesn't make anything better.
Absolutely. And I think it can also be difficult for the manager in this situation in a sense because they don't want to censor their employees and they don't want to shut them down if they're having feelings about this. But I think in our scenario here, we've got a thoughtfully crafted policy. Whether or not people know that or believe it, that's another thing, but I'm assuming I'm making up the story so I can make up the detail. So let's say it's a thoughtfully crafted policy and that it has been explained. The exception has been explained. So let's talk about the boundary. How could the manager approach this situation with the employee?
Well, again, we're going to acknowledge, state the reality, and then refocus.
Okay.
So the manager could say, for example, I understand that this is frustrating and disappointing for you.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the policy now. It is really important to use our time and energy to focus on the important things we can do in our jobs instead of continuing to discuss how unfair we feel things are.
Right.
So I'd like to know, how can I support you in letting this go for now? And are there other ways that our company can continue to show you increased appreciation and support?
That's a nice little add on there at the end. Like that. I understand that this is frustrating and disappointing for you. I think it's really important to start with that. And then again, and I like the and this is the policy now.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's interesting. In a sense, I would just stop there, and this is the policy now. But I like that you're adding support. How can I support you in kind of moving past this?
Yeah.
I like that.
And sometimes just pointing it out to people is enough. And sometimes this might open up a host of other complaints. And that gives you an opportunity to work on problem solving together or have a coaching conversation with the employee to help them be effective on their jobs.
What I like about how you've approached these examples, Irene, is how simple and straightforward it really is. You're really keeping it simple and straightforward. We're not complicating matters here. We're knowing what the boundary is, we're acknowledging the feelings, we're providing a bridge, and we're being very clear. And often I also hear this about how boundaries are about something I will do. I guess in these cases, it really is about saying there is a boundary. Let's talk about what that boundary is in a workplace situation.
Yes.
It really feels like that. Okay. I like that. Okay. Can we do one more?
Sure.
Actually, I've got two more. Let's talk about this one real quick. Let's imagine an employee needs to set a boundary with a supervisor. Okay. And the employee is experiencing any number of things. Could be their time or their space is interrupted, or, like the supervisor sends emails at all hours or enters the employee's workspace when they're not there and, I don't know, looks through drawers or files or speaks too loudly or stands too close. There's so many different variations of this. But this is the employee that needs to speak up to their manager. So how could we handle something like that?
All right. So it's really important to be strategic about when and how to deal with an issue. And if possible, to try to deal with the issues separately. Some of them can be handled in the moment, and some need you to have time and space to think about it. You can practice and rehearse so you're prepared, and you're prepared for those negative reactions. So you might be saying something like, it's a lack of respect for time. I really, really appreciate how talented you are and how much you want to get done. And I really need my personal time to be able to do the best job possible for our company or for our workplace. Would you please understand that I need more time? And if you're going to give me something that has a lot of extra work, that you'll help me reorganize my priorities.
Okay, good. Yep. Managing up. So thank you. I appreciate what you're trying to do. I appreciate, how much you get done and et cetera. And I really need this. I really need more time. And so would you, then it's a request at the end.
Yes.
Would you try to be conscientious of giving me more time or something like that?
Yes. Or that getting something at the last minute, right before the weekend that you want before Monday morning, not going to work for me.
Right. I'm sorry. I take my weekends off. And I always want to just key into the words, I'm sorry, because I probably say that too often.
I was going to say something about that.
Tell me, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, we've got this article we can send people to called Conscious Apologies
Okay.
because you don't need to be sorry. It's your right to take the weekend off. You can say, I'm sorry you're upset about this if somebody's upset, because then you are sorry, not because you're responsible, but kind of like, I'm sad or I care about you. I don't want you to be upset.
Right.
However, being sorry for setting a boundary,
Yeah. Don't do it.
you don't need to do it.
Right. I always need to be conscientious of that myself.
Me too.
Okay. Let's do one other version of this. Let's say a supervisor standing too close. I actually have a situation like this. And I know between the employee and the supervisor, there's kind of a big cultural difference between these two. And the employee has been feeling uncomfortable about this for quite some time and is a very kind person and wants to be respectful of cultural differences, but also wants to set a personal boundary about space. Do you have some recommendations?
Oh, yeah. So is the person standing over them or are they just moving close to them, standing too close?
Let's say they tend to lean over the person. They come and they lean over them while they're working at their desk. Let's use that.
You could just say something like, I know you really mean well and I like you. And I feel uncomfortable when somebody's leaning over me when I'm at my desk. Could you please give me some more space?
Yeah. I'd have to practice that one.
Find slightly different words and how to say it as you practice out loud because my words won't be quite your words. But you see, not sure it's not
Right.
justifying. It's just you feel uncomfortable and somebody's leaning over you and it's very specific.
Yeah. It's a whole lot better than saying something, back off.
Person says something and it might be, what? I guess you're sure touchy today. It's your period or something, That's a whole other conversation, but you can say, actually, I should have said it to you before. I'm so sorry I didn't.
Oh, wow. That is some receptivity right there.
I feel uncomfortable when people stand that close to me. It's not about you. It's not about anything else in my life. It's just about what works for me.
Good. 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 Boy, you are really modeling this way of being calm and present and really in the moment. And it feels confident. It feels confident, not reactive. It doesn't feel edgy or anything. It feels very calm and confident.
I'm confident and clear.
Yes, I love it.
Kind. All of those things.
Okay, so let's do a quick recap, if we may. A couple of things, top 3 to 4 things people want to remember about setting and respecting boundaries. Can you give us a short list?
Yes. Be specific. Don't make assumptions about their character or their intentions. Focus on the behavior. It's simple. Lead with a connection, a positive connection, and be prepared to persist in the face of initial negative reactions.
Okay, I love it. I feel like we could go on and on, Irene, but I really appreciate your time and thank you so much for being here. I'd like to include your workplace boundaries and personal practice guide. And I'd like to put that in the show notes for our listeners because I will tell you, listeners, there is some great detail on this short guide, really good examples, and it includes everything that we've talked about in terms of how to approach these kinds of situations. So much good information. Also, I know that Kidpower provides lots of free resources, an entire online learning center where people can learn so much. And can you talk a little bit about how our listeners can learn more and where to find you?
Yes, people write to us from all over the world all the time with specific problems and questions that they have because we've got a lot of information and resources, but it's a bit overwhelming. You can always email us at safety@kidpower.org. If you just want to see a nice gateway into our resources, visit kidpower.org/learn more, and that will get you there.
Fabulous. Thank you. And Irene, I want to thank you for the amazing impact that you and Kidpower are making on this world. You are truly changing lives and improving lives every single day around the globe and making this world a better place. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. And I want to thank you for having been with me on this journey for so many years. I've learned a lot from you as well.
Thank you. Until next time, everybody, I really want to encourage you to check out those Kidpower resources. If you're a parent, if you go to work, if you wake up in the morning, I promise you, you will find something incredibly useful for life there and something that can help you improve your relationships. So check it out. Okay, that was fun. And I hope you noticed how Irene stayed calm and non-defensive in every role play we did. She's a master, and I always aspire to be more like Irene. So honestly, like I said in the episode, if you have kids or relationships with anyone, I'll bet you'll find something helpful for leading a more empowered life over at kidpower.org. Check out their library and definitely don't forget to download the Workplace Boundaries Personal Practice handout from the show notes. It's loaded with great information. As always, thank you so much for being here. And if you like the show, don't forget to head on over to Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts and rate and follow the show. It really helps us get our message out. Until next time, go lead the way.